I thought the worst part of the night was catching my husband kissing his coworker by the emergency exit. I was wrong. The real nightmare began the next morning when my keycard failed and an email arrived at 9 a.m. with coordinates and the words beneficiary confirmation. That compass coin I gave to a stranger at the train station was not charity. It was the key to a secret his family had been hunting since before we met. My name is Brielle Monroe, and for a senior risk analyst at Northgate Claims and Metrics, I failed to calculate the most obvious probability in the room. I stood in the center of the ballroom, clutching a lukewarm glass of champagne while Jingle Bell Rock blared through speakers that cost more than my first car. I was 34 years old, wearing a velvet dress that Evan insisted I buy, surrounded by the fake warmth of the Caldwell family empire. The shareholders were laughing. The wives were comparing diamonds. But my husband, Evan Caldwell, had been missing from the dance floor for exactly 22 minutes. I excused myself, navigating the sea of black tuxedos and forced holiday cheer. I turned down the quiet service corridor behind the banquet hall, looking for the bathroom or perhaps just a moment of silence. I found neither. Near the emergency exit, beneath a plastic wreath that smelled of dust and pine, I saw them. Evan was pressed against the wall. Tessa Rowe, the new junior associate he had hired 3 weeks ago, was pressed against him. His mouth was on hers. It was not a drunk, accidental brush of lips. It was hungry. It was familiar. I made a sound, a sharp intake of breath that echoed off the linoleum. Evan pulled back, but not before I saw his hand lingering on the small of her back. He looked at me, his eyes wide but terrifyingly clear. You're seeing this wrong, Bree, he said, his voice dropping to a smooth, practiced whisper. It's just a misunderstanding. He did not step away from her. The audacity of the lie, delivered while he was practically still entangled with her, struck me mute. I turned on my heel and walked away. The ride home was a masterclass in gaslighting. Evan drove with a white-knuckled grip, his jaw tight. He did not apologize. Instead, he negotiated. "Do not make a scene out of this," he said, staring straight ahead at the highway. "Think about the reputation. Think about the shareholders. You are overreacting. It was nothing. If you blow this up, you ruin everything we have built. As if we were kissing Tessa Rowe by the fire exit. When we reached our building, I moved faster than I ever had in my life. I stepped out of the elevator and unlocked our apartment door. Before he could follow, I grabbed the suitcase he kept packed for business trips, the one by the entryway, and shoved it into the hallway. "Brielle, stop this." "Open the door," he hissed, banging his fist against the wood. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the door, my hands shaking so hard I could barely lock the deadbolt. "Sleep wherever you want. Just not here. Go back to her." "I don't care." I slid the chain lock into place. Silence fell on the other side, followed by the ding of the elevator. I thought I had won the battle. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from his mother, Janice Caldwell. "You are ungrateful. He is under so much stress because of the merger. You are destroying his future over a moment of weakness." She knew. She knew before I even got home. I sat on the floor of the living room, watching the city lights blur through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I checked the call logs on our shared plan. Evan was not calling me to beg for forgiveness. He was on the line with Randall Pike, the family lawyer. He was making calls to fix the problem. I was the problem. I fell asleep right there on the rug, exhausted by the adrenaline crash. I woke up to the gray light of a winter morning and a strange silence. I stood up, my body aching, and walked to the door to leave for work. I tapped my keycard against the sensor to disengage the alarm. It beeped red. Access denied. I frowned and tried again. Red. I pulled my phone out to check the security app. A notification popped up: session expired. I tried to log in. User not found. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the back of my neck. I opened my banking app. Logged out. I typed in my password. Incorrect password. I opened my email. Password changed 0 minutes ago. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. Locking Evan out of the apartment had felt like a victory last night, but as I stood there in my wrinkled velvet dress, trapped in a penthouse that no longer recognized my biometrics, I realized the truth. I had not started a fight. I had started a war, and while I was sleeping, the Caldwells had already launched the first nuclear strike. I took the service elevator down to the lobby because the main lift would not read my card. The marble foyer, usually bright and welcoming, felt like a courtroom. Gary, the doorman who had known my coffee order for 3 years, found a sudden and intense interest in his logbook. He refused to meet my eyes. "Gary," I asked, my voice cracking slightly. He did not look up. He just pressed the button to slide the glass doors open. They were waiting for me on the sidewalk. It was a lineup execution. Evan stood in the center, wearing the maroon cashmere sweater I had bought him for his birthday last month. It looked soft and warm. His face, however, was a mask of cold indifference. To his right stood his mother, Janice, clutching her pearl-handled purse like a weapon. To his left was Randall Pike, the family attorney who had drafted our prenup. Randall stepped forward before I could speak. He extended a thick manila envelope toward me. "Mrs. Caldwell," Randall said, his voice flat and professional. "This is a temporary vacate order. Your residency rights have been revoked effective immediately. The lease for the penthouse has been transferred to Caldwell Family Holdings this morning. You are trespassing." I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing. This is my home. My name is on the lease." "Not anymore," Randall said, the corporate clause. Read the fine print. Janice stepped forward then. She was holding 2 large, black, heavy-duty trash bags. She did not hand them to me. She dropped them on the wet concrete pavement at my feet. One of the bags was not tied effectively. A sleeve of my favorite silk work blouse spilled out, soaking up a puddle of dirty slush. We packed the essentials. Janice sneered, looking at the bags as if they were infected. "Everything else is property of the trust. You came to us with nothing. You leave with nothing." I looked at Evan. I needed him to say something. I needed him to be the man who had promised to protect me. I needed him to be shocked by his mother's cruelty. He finally looked at me, but his eyes were vacant. "Sign it. Just sign it for peace." "Bree," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't want a scandal." The sound of my nickname in his mouth made me physically nauseous. That was it. No apology for the woman by the fire exit. No defense against his mother throwing my life into the gutter. Just a plea to protect his reputation. I did not take the envelope. I grabbed the wet, plastic necks of the trash bags. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely make a fist. I hope she was worth it," I whispered. I turned my back on them. I wanted to call an Uber, to get away from their staring eyes. I pulled my phone out. Face ID rejected. I typed in my passcode. My fingers flew across the screen to my banking app. Account locked. Contact administrator. I tried my credit card app. Card canceled. I tried my email. Password changed. Then, a notification slid down from the top of the screen. It was from the HR department at Northgate Claims and Metrics. Subject resignation confirmation. Dear Brielle, we have received your immediate resignation and have processed your exit interview waiver as requested. I stopped walking. The wind cut through my coat, biting my skin. They had not just kicked me out, they had erased me. In the span of 6 hours, they had stripped me of my home, my money, and my career. Someone had accessed my work account and quit for me. I dragged the heavy bags toward the subway station, the plastic scraping loudly against the pavement. People walked past me. glancing at the well-dressed woman hauling garbage bags, and then quickly looked away. I was no longer a person to them. I was a scene to be avoided. I was someone else's problem. I reached the turnstile, my breath hitching in my throat. I had no Apple Pay. I had no cards. I stood there, freezing, the humiliation burning my cheeks. Then I remembered, with trembling fingers. I popped the case off my phone. Tucked behind the black plastic was a single, folded $20 bill. It was a habit I had kept since I was 16 years old in the foster care system, a getaway fund, a survival instinct I thought I had outgrown when I married a Caldwell. I pulled the crisp bill out. It was the only thing in the world that was truly mine. And as I fed it into the ticket machine, I realized it was the only weapon I had left. The subway station was a hollowed-out concrete ribcage, echoing with the distant screech of metal on metal. I sat on a bench that smelled of bleach and stale urine, clutching my trash bags like they were filled with diamonds. A few feet away, a pile of blankets stirred. It was an elderly woman. She was not just shivering from the draft that swept down the tunnel. She was vibrating. Her skin was gray and clammy. I recognized the signs immediately. Hypoglycemia. I had exactly one protein bar in my purse, the last remnant of the lunch I never got to eat yesterday. I had no home, no husband, and $20 to my name. Logic dictated I hoard every calorie. But I looked at her, and I saw the future the Caldwells wanted for me. I ripped the wrapper open. I knelt on the dirty tile floor. "Ma'am," I whispered, touching her shoulder gently. "You need to eat this. Please, try to chew." She groaned, her eyelids fluttering. I held a bottle of water to her cracked lips. I waved down a station attendant who was sweeping the far end of the platform, gesturing for him to keep an eye on her. As I fed her the chocolate bar, a thought anchored me. They took my house. They took my name. But I was still a human being. The sugar hit her system fast. Her eyes snapped open. They were not the cloudy, defeated eyes I expected. They were a piercing, electric blue, intelligent, and terrifyingly lucid. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was iron. You shouldn't be here," she rasped, her voice sounding like gravel crunching under tires. "I have nowhere else to go," I said softly. She fumbled inside the layers of her coat and pulled out something small and heavy. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it. It was a coin, warm from her body heat. It felt heavier than gold. On one side, there was a relief of an old-fashioned compass. On the other, a stylized letter, M. "Listen to me," she said, pulling me closer until I could smell the dust on her skin. "Don't sell it. Don't trade it for a cheap bed. It isn't money. It is a door. I can't take your money." I started to say, "Keep it," she hissed, her blue eyes blazing. "They act like they own the city, but they don't see us. You keep it, child." I pocketed the coin because arguing felt disrespectful. I left her with the attendant and dragged my bags up the stairs to the street. I found a motel 3 blocks away that accepted cash and did not ask for ID. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and desperation. A red neon sign outside flickered incessantly, casting a bloody pulse across the cheap bedspread. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. I held the coin in my hand. It felt unnaturally warm, humming against my skin. At 13 minutes past 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. I sat up, my heart hammering. It was an email, no subject line. Sender unknown. 9 in the morning. Harrington Meridian Legal Annex. Bring the token. My thumb hovered over the delete button. It had to be a scam. It had to be some cruel joke. But then I saw the attachment. I clicked it. It was a scanned photograph, grainy and sepia-toned. It showed a young woman laughing, her head thrown back. It was my mother, Calla. She had died when I was 6, leaving me nothing but a few foggy memories and a lifetime in the foster system. In the photo, she was wearing a necklace. I zoomed in. The pendant was identical to the coin in my hand. The compass. The M. I stopped breathing. I had a keepsake box once, a small wooden chest with my mother's few belongings. When I moved into the penthouse, Janice Caldwell had offered to keep it in her climate-controlled vault for safekeeping. Paper rots. Brielle, she had said, let me protect your history. I realized then that she had not been protecting it. She had been hiding it. Why would the powerful Caldwell family care about a dead woman's necklace? Why did they move so fast to erase me? As if they were on a deadline, I gripped the coin until the edges bit into my palm. I was not going to sleep. I was going to the Harrington Meridian Legal Annex. I had nothing left to lose. But for the first time in 24 hours, I had a question that needed an answer, and I would walk through hell to get it. The Harrington Meridian Legal Annex was a monolith of black glass that seemed to swallow the morning light. I walked through the revolving doors, feeling the heavy gaze of security cameras on my back. I approached the reception desk, ready to explain who I was, but the woman behind the marble counter did not ask for my name. She did not even look at her computer screen. She simply pressed a button under the desk and pointed to the far elevator bank. 41st floor, she said, her voice devoid of inflection. You are on time. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, the kind of silence that made your ears pop. The doors opened directly into a private lobby that smelled of expensive leather and ozone. A woman was waiting for me. She was sharp angles and tailored wool, with hair cut into a severe bob that moved like a solid sheet of obsidian. This was Sloane Archer. She did not offer a hand to shake. She did not smile. She gestured to a low mahogany table between two armchairs. The token, Sloane said, her tone precise. Place it on the tray. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy coin. I placed it on the black velvet tray. It made a dull thud. Sloane sat down and crossed her legs. May Winters does not exist, she said. The woman you met at the station is Meredith Harrington, founder of the Harrington Meridian Group. Her personal net worth is currently valued at approximately $1.2 trillion. My breath hitched. No, that is impossible. She was homeless. She was shaking from hunger. It is a stress test, Sloane replied, not blinking. A city ethics test. Meredith believes that to find a worthy successor, one must look at how a person treats those who can offer them nothing. You passed. Sloane slid a thick file across the table. It slid smoothly over the polished wood. I opened it. The first page was a birth certificate. Calla Monroe, my mother. Calla was Meredith's estranged daughter who ran away 30 years ago, Sloane explained. We have been looking for her child for a decade. You are the direct granddaughter of Meredith Harrington. You are the sole heir. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling, but Sloane was not done. She flipped the page to a photocopy of a receipt. It was from a high-end pawn shop, dated 2 years ago. The item listed was a gold pendant with a compass and the letter M. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Janice Caldwell. She told me she was keeping it safe, I whispered, the betrayal burning hotter than the shame. They knew, Sloane said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. Janice Caldwell liquidated the original proof of your lineage 2 years ago to fund a gap in her company's ledger. We tracked the sale, but they did not know about the secondary protocol the coin until yesterday. That is why they panicked. Sloane leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. They called my office at 6 a.m. today to inquire about spousal inheritance rights regarding the Harrington estate. They did not kick you out because of an affair. Brielle. They kicked you out to make you desperate. They need you to sign that divorce settlement waiving your rights before the DNA results go public. They want you to sign away a $1 billion legacy for a few months of rent. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest. It replaced the fear. They hadn't just rejected me. They were trying to rob me. We need a DNA swab, Sloane said, producing a sterile kit. Then you will sign an affidavit. I have an encrypted phone for you. We have a safe house arranged for the next 24 hours. I nodded and opened my mouth for the swab. As soon as we finished, my old phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. Evan. Sloan pushed the new, black encrypted phone toward me but pointed to my old one. Answer it. Record it. I swiped the green button and put it on speaker. Bree Evans' voice was sickeningly sweet, the same tone he used when he wanted me to host a dinner for his clients. I feel terrible about last night. Look, I will give you money for a rental if you just sign the agreement today. I just want you safe. I don't want you on the street. I looked at Sloan. She nodded once. I will take a look at it, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice, playing the broken wife they wanted me to be. I am just so tired. Evan. Great, he said, the relief audible and insulting. I will send the courier. Just sign it. Babe. I hung up. I looked at the pawnshop receipt one last time. Let's go to work, I said. The safe house was less of a home and more of a tactical command center disguised as a luxury loft. The windows were reinforced with ballistic glass, and the living room table was covered in monitors and tangled cables. Sloan stood at the head of the table like a general and introduced her team. Devin Cole was the digital forensics expert, a woman who typed faster than she spoke. Malcolm Reese was the forensic accountant, a man so still he blended into the furniture. And standing by the door with his arms crossed was Knox Dyer, the head of security who looked like he could stop a tank with one hand. Devin spun her monitor around to face us. I traced the unauthorized login to your email, Devin said, tapping the screen. It did not come from a random hacker farm. The IP address resolves directly to the executive server at Northgate Claims and Metrics. Specifically, a terminal registered to Evan Caldwell. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. He hacked me. He downloaded everything, Devin confirmed. Search history, ancestry results, medical records. They were data mining you to find the Harrington connection before they made their move. Malcolm cleared his throat and projected a complex flowchart onto the wall. Lines of red and green crisscrossed like a spider web. The Caldwell Family Charity is a slush fund, Malcolm stated flatly. It is classic layering. Donations come in from high society galas. They sit for 3 days. Then 80% transfers to a shell company called Crestline Development. From there, it pays off corporate credit cards, a yacht lease, and a recurring monthly consulting fee to Evan Caldwell. But here is the smoking gun, Malcolm continued, pointing to a thick black line at the base of the chart. The entire Caldwell empire is leveraged to the hilt. They are operating on a liquidity lifeline called a Meridian Growth Note. It is a high-interest financial instrument owned by Harrington Meridian. Sloan looked at me. If Meredith Harrington calls that note due, the Caldwells are bankrupt. They need you to control the debt. Or they need to be the ones who inherit the authority to forgive it. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from a number I did not have saved. Do not sign. I frowned. Who is this Rhea? I whispered. Evan's sister. The family hates her because she refused to marry a senator's son. Another message came through. It was an image file. It was a screenshot of an email chain dated 4 months before I ever met Evan. The subject line read, Target Acquisition Monroe. Brielle. Attached was a report from a private investigator detailing my work schedule, my favorite coffee shop, and my route to the subway. My hands started shaking. I dropped the phone onto the table. It was all a lie, I managed to say, my voice trembling. The day we met. He spilled coffee on me. He was so charming, so apologetic. It was a script. He was waiting for me. Look at this, Devin said, her voice sharp. I just pulled your credit monitoring report. Look at the status flag. I leaned in. Next to my social security number, a new tag had been added 48 hours ago, 2 days before the Christmas party. Status deceased or incapacitated. They killed me, I said, staring at the screen. They killed me on paper before I even locked him out. It allows them to freeze assets without a court order immediately, Sloan explained. Standard predator tactic. And there is more. Devin added, the DMV just updated. Your car, the one you bought before the marriage, has a repossession order. A lien was placed on it yesterday using a P.O. box in Nevada. They had stripped me of my home, my money, my identity, and even my car. They had orchestrated our entire romance to secure a line of credit. I looked around the room at the team of strangers who were now my only army. I picked up the encrypted phone. I typed a reply to Rhea. Tell them I am scared. Tell them I will come to sign. I hit send. The bait is in the water, I said, looking at Sloan. Let's go catch a shark. The invitation arrived by private courier, printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing. It was an invitation to the annual Caldwell Christmas Charity Gala at Crestmont Hall. Underneath the event details, a handwritten note from Janice scrawled in red ink read, Family Reconciliation Press Event. Be there to sign, or the offer expires. I played my part perfectly. I sent an email back, typing with deliberate typos to simulate exhaustion. I told them I was broken. I told them I would accept the $50,000 to disappear from their lives forever. I just want it to be over. I wrote, please, don't hurt me anymore. Janice replied within 3 minutes with a VIP parking pass. She swallowed the bait whole. At the safe house, Sloan was not preparing me for a party. She was preparing me for war. She zipped me into a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk. It was minimalist, severe, and cost more than my annual salary. It is armor, Sloan said, fastening a diamond tennis bracelet around my wrist. You do not look like a victim tonight. You look like the owner. She handed me the contract for the venue. Sloan had bought the debt of Crestmont Hall that morning. Technically, we were not crashing their party. We were hosting it. We arrived at 8 in the evening. The red carpet was blinded by flashing lights. When the valet opened the door and I stepped out, the roar of the paparazzi died down to a confused murmur. They were expecting a weeping, disheveled woman who had been thrown out of her home. Instead, they got a woman walking with her head high, flanked by a security detail that looked like the Secret Service. I walked past the reporters, ignoring their shouted questions, and entered the ballroom. The first thing I saw made my blood run cold. Hanging above the main stage was a massive banner, the Calla Monroe Youth Scholarship. Janice was using my dead mother's name to solicit donations. She was using the memory of the woman she stole from to polish her own public image. The pain was sharp, but it clarified everything. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. Janice and Evan were waiting at a table set up near the stage, surrounded by reporters. Evan smiled when he saw me, but it did not reach his eyes. He tapped a leather folder on the table. Glad you came to your senses. Bree, he said, sliding the document toward me. Just sign here, and we can put this ugly mess behind us. I picked up the pen, but I did not sign. I read the text. It was a trap. Paragraph 4 admitted to temporary mental instability. Paragraph 5 waived all future claims to the Harrington estate. Paragraph 6 absolved Janice Caldwell of any liability regarding misplaced personal property, effectively covering up the theft of my mother's necklace. I dropped the pen. It rolled across the document. I am not signing this, I said, my voice loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. Evan's smile vanished. His face twisted into a snarl. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. You listened to me, he hissed, leaning in, his breath hot and smelling of scotch. You take the money, or, I promise you. Before he could finish the threat, a hand the size of a shovel clamped onto his shoulder. Knox Dyer squeezed just once. Let her go, Knox said, his voice low and dangerous. Evan yelped and recoiled, rubbing his shoulder. The cameras flashed wildly. The image of the charming philanthropist manhandling his wife was now immortalized. Evan scrambled onto the stage to regain control of the narrative. He grabbed the microphone, his smile frantic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, "please." A round of applause for our mystery partners. "We have a special announcement about the future of the fund." He gestured to the massive LED screen behind him, expecting the Caldwell logo. Instead, the screen flickered black. Then, a new logo appeared in stark white Harrington Continuity Trust. A red banner flashed across the screen. Alert, unauthorized disbursement. Compliance audit triggered. The music cut out. The room fell into a dead silence. Then, the ticker started running at the bottom of the screen. It was not stock prices. It was a live feed of bank transfers. Transfer charity fund to Crestline Development voided. Transfer Crestline to Evan Caldwell Personal flagged for fraud. Transfer vendor overpayment to North Star Halo Media frozen. Evan stood frozen under the spotlight, the data of his crimes scrolling behind him like movie credits. He looked at the sea of donors, shareholders, and journalists. The Christmas party was over. The public trial had just begun. Sloane Archer did not shout. She simply walked to the microphone stand that Evan had abandoned. She tapped it once, a sound that cracked like a gunshot through the whispering hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sloane said, her voice cool and commanding. By accepting the Harrington Continuity Trust's financial backing, the Caldwell Family Charity agreed to an immediate on-site compliance audit clause. Clause 7A, we are activating it now. Malcolm Reese stepped forward with a tablet, his face illuminated by the harsh glow of the screen. He read from it as if reading a grocery list. 72%, Malcolm announced. That is the current administrative overhead for this charity. For every dollar you donated to feed orphans or support education, 72 cents went to Caldwell-owned consulting firms. A gasp rippled through the crowd. A woman in the front row, wearing a diamond necklace worth more than my student loans, stood up. Her face was pale. "Is this true?" she demanded. "I donated $50,000 last night." Janice Caldwell shoved her way to the front, snatching a microphone from a stunned technician. Her composure was cracking, the veneer of the benevolent matriarch peeling away to reveal the predator underneath. "Lies," Janice screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "This woman is unstable. Brielle is having a breakdown. She made up this story about inheritance. She is trying to extort us because my son left her." Sloane nodded to the sound technician we had planted in the booth. Suddenly, Evan's voice boomed through the speakers. It was the recording I made yesterday. The audio was crystal clear. "Sign it. Just sign it for peace. Bry. I don't want a scandal. I will give you money for a rental if you just sign the agreement today. I just want you safe. I don't want you on the street." The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a reputation dying in real time. Then, the back doors swung open. A young woman walked in. She wore leather, not silk, and her combat boots thudded against the floor. It was Rhea, Evan's sister. She marched up the aisle, holding a stack of printed emails. "It wasn't love," Rhea said, her voice shaking but loud. She threw the papers at Evan's feet. "It was a job interview. Mom hired a private investigator 4 months before you met Brielle. Here is the timeline. Here is the script for the coffee shop meeting." Evan stared at the papers scattered on the floor. He looked at his mother. You told me it was fate," he whispered, his face draining of color. "You told me she was just a good match. He hadn't known. He was a monster." Yes, but he was also a puppet. Chaos erupted. Donors were shouting for refunds. Someone was calling the Economic Crimes Division. Janice was being shielded by her security team, her eyes darting around like a trapped rat. We left before the police arrived. We had won the battle, but the war was far from over. We retreated to the safe house. I finally managed to sleep for 2 hours, but I woke up to a nightmare. Brielle, Devin said, shaking me awake. You need to see this. Do not look at the comments. Just watch. She handed me a tablet. It was a video posted on a new social media account under my name. In the video, I was sitting in a dark room, looking disheveled and manic. I made it all up. The digital version of me sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted the money. The Caldwells are good people. I am sick. I need help. It was perfect. The voice was mine. The mannerisms were mine. But the eyes were dead. It is a deep fake, I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. A really good one. We traced the metadata, Devin said, typing furiously. It was rendered 3 hours ago by a firm called North Star Halo Media. They are on a retainer from the Caldwell Charity Fund. My phone rang. It was Evan. I put it on speaker. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. I didn't know they were going to do that. Bree. He sobbed. I told them to stop. I told them no video. Who is them? Evan, I asked. My voice cold. Grant, he blurted out. Grant Harrington. He is on the board. He said he would kill the audit if we released the video. He said he would fix it. I looked at Sloane. Her face went pale. Grant Harrington, she repeated softly. I hung up on my husband. I finally understood the scope of the game. This wasn't just about a cheating husband or a greedy mother-in-law. The Caldwells were just the hired help. This is a coup, I said, standing up. They are using me to declare Meredith incompetent so Grant can take over the company. I am not a person to them. I am a sacrificial lamb. Sloane grabbed her coat. Then let's go introduce the lamb to the butcher. North Glass Pavilion was not a hospital. It was a fortress of glass and steel hidden in the hills, accessible only by a private road that did not appear on GPS. The woman sitting in the high-backed leather chair was not May Winters, the shivering homeless woman I had met in the subway tunnel. She was Meredith Harrington, and she wore a charcoal suit that cost more than the entire foster home I grew up in. But the eyes were the same, blue, piercing, and terrifyingly awake. The Caldwells are just parasites, Meredith said, her voice steady but weak, lacking the gravelly rasp of the character she had played. Fleas on a dog. Grant Harrington. He is the one who wants to turn my empire into a weapon. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a gold coin. It was identical to the one she had given me at the station, but this one gleamed with a heavy, dangerous luster. Take it, she commanded, pressing it into my hand. It is the override key. If there is a dispute regarding the mental competency of the chair, this activates your voting rights immediately. But Grant knows this. He will smear you until that coin looks like a stolen trinket. Why me, I asked, gripping the cold metal until it hurt. I am nobody. I am a risk analyst who got played by her husband. You are the only one who fed a starving woman when you had nothing left to give, she replied. Now go. The wolves are waiting. Sloane drove us to the Harrington Meridian headquarters. The boardroom on the top floor was an expanse of polished mahogany and silence, overlooking the city that had chewed me up and spit me out. 2 people were waiting for us. Grant Harrington, a man who looked like a magazine cover model with dead eyes, and Elise Varick, the CFO who looked at me like I was a rounding error in her spreadsheet. Grant slid a thick document across the table. Succession lock agreement, Grant said, smiling a smile that did not show his teeth. We are willing to overlook the unfortunate video of your breakdown. We know how stressful divorce can be. This agreement protects the company from your instability. I looked at the paper. It was a competency clause. It cited Evan's temporary restraining order and the deepfake video as proof that I was mentally unfit to inherit. They were gaslighting me on a corporate scale. I am not unstable, I said, keeping my voice level. The video suggests otherwise, Elise noted, not looking up from her tablet. and the public tends to believe what they see on their screens. I glanced down at the open ledger Elise had left on the table. It was a vendor list for the data infrastructure project. My risk analyst brain kicked in, scanning for patterns. My eyes snagged on a familiar name, North Star Halo Media, and right below it, Crestline Development. My blood ran cold. I looked at Grant, and suddenly the pieces clicked into place. The slush fund, the deepfake, the smear campaign. I started, my voice trembling with rage. You are paying them. You are funneling money out of Harrington through these vendors, overpaying for data services to North Star, who makes the deepfakes, sending consulting fees to Crestline, which goes to Janice. I stood up, slamming my hand on the table. It is a circle. You steal from the company to pay the Caldwells, and they do your dirty work to keep you in power. Janice didn't hunt me down for money. She hunted me down because you hired her to eliminate a threat to your succession. Grant stopped smiling. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote quickly, tore the slip of paper out, and slid it toward me. $50 million, Grant said softly. Tax-free. You go to Europe. You change your name. You live like a queen. You can buy 1,000 husbands better than Evan. Or you stay here, and I destroy what is left of your life. He looked at me with pity. He thought I was still the foster kid who hoarded $20 bills for survival. He thought everyone had a price because he had sold his soul years ago. I picked up the check. I looked at the zeros, then I ripped it in half, and then in half again. I don't want your hush money, I said, throwing the confetti pieces at his face. I want the truth, and I am going to take it. Grant's face hardened into stone. Sloane's phone buzzed. She checked it, and for the first time since I met her, I saw fear in her eyes. We have a problem, Sloane whispered to me, turning away from Grant. They just fast-tracked the competency hearing. The judge set it for 9 a.m. tomorrow. That is when the board meeting starts. I said, realizing the trap. Exactly. Sloane said, you cannot be in 2 places at once. If you miss the court, you are declared incompetent by default. If you miss the board meeting, Grant takes the chair. Grant leaned back in his leather chair, checking his expensive watch. Tick-tock. Mrs. Caldwell. Tick-tock. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood. At the plaintiff's table, Evan sat with his head bowed, looking like a grieving husband. Next to him, Janice dabbled a handkerchief to dry eyes, playing the role of the terrified mother-in-law to perfection. Your Honor, Evan's lawyer began, his voice dripping with faux concern. We are requesting an immediate freeze on any future assets and temporary guardianship. Mrs. Caldwell's recent behavior? The deepfake video clearly shows a woman in the midst of a psychotic break. She is a danger to herself and the estate. I sat next to Sloane. My hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. The judge looked at me, his expression unreadable. Ms. Archer, the judge asked. Sloane stood up. She did not look worried. She looked bored. Your Honor, we would like to submit Exhibit A, Sloane said, sliding a document onto the bench. This is a notarized affidavit regarding the post-nuptial agreement. The plaintiff claims my client signed away her rights. However, the timestamp on the digital signature stamp is fraudulent. Devin Cole stepped forward to the podium, projecting an image onto the court screen. If you look at the metadata, Devin explained, pointing to a string of code, this paragraph regarding the waiver of inheritance rights was inserted into the document exactly 42 minutes after Mrs. Caldwell was locked out of her apartment. The login credentials used to make this edit belonged to Janice Caldwell. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Janice froze, her handkerchief hovering midair. Objection, Evan's lawyer shouted. This is speculation. I have the server logs. Devin shot back calmly. Call Rhea Caldwell to the stand, Sloane announced. The doors opened, and Rhea walked in. She avoided looking at her mother. She walked straight to the witness box. Ms. Caldwell, Sloan asked. When did your family become interested in Brielle Monroe? Rhea took a deep breath. 4 months before they met. My mother hired a private investigator to find the lost heir of the Harrington estate. When they found Brielle, they realized the only way to control the money was to control her. The goal was to lock Brielle down with a marriage and a restrictive legal paper trail before she ever found out who she really was. Evan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked at his mother, his face a mask of horror. You told me she was just a normal girl, Evan stammered, his voice cracking. You said, Mom, you said this was about the company image. Not a setup. Sit down. Mr. Caldwell. The judge barked, but the damage was done. The courtroom saw it. Evan wasn't the victim. He was the unwitting jailer. Sloan turned on Evan, her voice sharp. Mr. Caldwell, answer me. When you locked your wife out of the apartment, you knew she had no money. You knew she had no family to turn to. You knew she would be on the street in the middle of winter. Did you call for help? Did you call a doctor? Evan stuttered, looking at his hands. I thought she needed a push to sign. You didn't want to protect her, Sloan said, her voice like ice. You wanted to break her. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough. The request for guardianship is denied with prejudice. I am ordering an immediate investigation into the falsification of these documents and the origin of the deepfake video. Mrs. Janice Caldwell, you are to surrender your passport immediately. You are not to leave the state. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We had won the skirmish, but I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 47 minutes past 9 in the morning. We are late, I whispered to Sloan. The board meeting started 17 minutes ago, Sloan said, shoving papers into her briefcase. Grant is activating the succession protocol right now. We ran out of the courthouse, ignoring the shouting reporters. As we climbed into the waiting black SUV, I felt a wave of panic. We missed the vote, I said, my voice rising. If Grant called the vote at 9:30, it is over. He has the majority. Sloan turned to me, a small, terrifying smile playing on her lips. Grant thinks he is playing chess, she said. But Meredith Harrington invented the game. She tapped her phone. The proxy was activated earlier than expected, Sloan revealed. Meredith submitted her DNA confirmation and the trust transfer protocols through a secure channel at 8 this morning. You didn't need to be there to vote. You just need to be there to take your seat. As long as you walk through those doors before 10 o'clock, you are the casting vote. 9 minutes, I said, checking my watch. Driver, Sloan commanded. Don't stop for red lights. I slammed the heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom open with enough force to rattle the glass walls. Grant Harrington stood at the head of the table, his hand raised in the air. He was mid-sentence. Motion to remove Meredith Harrington as chair on the grounds of permanent cognitive incapacitation, Grant said, his voice booming. All in favor. 12 hands started to rise. Nay, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. Every head turned. Grant froze, his hand still suspended in the air. He looked at me as if I were a ghost rising from a grave he had personally dug. You have no standing here, Elise Varick said, standing up. Security Sloan Archer walked past me and slapped a thick stack of documents onto the polished table. Actually, she has the only standing that matters, Sloan announced. Here is the certified voting proxy from the Harrington Trust, activated as of 8 this morning. And here is the court order from Judge Reynolds confirming the video evidence used against her was a fraudulent deepfake manufactured by a vendor on your payroll. Brielle Monroe is not a rumor. She is the casting vote. Grant slowly lowered his hand. This is absurd. No, this is accounting. Malcolm Reese said. He tapped his tablet, and the main projection screen shifted. The flow chart we had built in the safe house appeared, looming over the board members. We tracked the vendor overpayments approved by CFO Elise Varick, Malcolm explained, his laser pointer hitting a red box. The money left Harrington accounts, went through a shell company, and paid the retainer for North Star Halo Media. They created the deepfake to discredit Mrs. Caldwell, and the Caldwell family charity was used as the clean face to hide the dirty money. Elise Varick sneered. You cannot prove I knew where that money went. Janice Caldwell managed those accounts. That is what we thought too, Malcolm said, until we found the signature card for the offshore holding account in the Caymans. He clicked the remote. A signature appeared on the screen, blown up to 10 times its size. It wasn't Janice's handwriting. It was Elise's. Grant isn't just incompetent, I said, looking Grant dead in the eye. He is an internal accomplice to embezzlement. The room erupted. Board members were shouting. Grant looked at Elise, realizing she had left a paper trail that would hang them both. I did not wait for the noise to settle. I turned to the legal secretary recording the minutes. As the acting proxy for the chair, I said, my voice steady, I am activating the ethics clause within the Meridian Growth Note held by the Caldwell estate. The loan is recalled in full. Effective immediately. That was the kill shot. The Caldwell empire, built entirely on that loan, evaporated in a single sentence. Their credit lines would freeze. Their assets would be seized. Janice was not just bankrupt, she was destitute. Security officers entered the room, followed by agents in windbreakers that said Financial Crimes Division. They moved toward Grant and Elise. You cannot do this, Grant shouted as they pulled him away from the head of the table. I am a Harrington. You were, I said softly. I turned and walked out. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The air felt lighter, easier to breathe. But as I reached the glass doors, a disheveled figure sprinted across the marble floor. It was Evan. He was sweating, his tie undone, his eyes wild with panic. He tried to grab my arm, but Knox stepped in between us, a silent wall of muscle. Brielle, wait, Evan gasped, trying to look around Knox. You have to stop it. The bank. They just called. They are locking the accounts. They are seizing the penthouse. That is my home. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with, the man I had thought was my partner. I saw nothing but a stranger who was afraid of being poor. Please, Bree, he pleaded, tears welling up in his eyes. We can fix this. I know I messed up, but I am your husband. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at him one last time. Answer me one thing. Evan, I said, did you need to know who I was to choose to be kind? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence gave me my answer. I reached into my purse and pulled out the divorce papers Sloan had drafted. I signed them against the wall, right there in the lobby. I handed them to him. The scholarship named after my mother has been transferred to an independent trust. I said, it is the only thing from your family that survives today. I pushed past him and walked out the revolving doors. The winter wind hit my face, cold and biting. But for the first time in my life, it didn't make me shiver. I was not the woman they locked out. I was the woman who chose to leave. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.